All right, welcome back. We are game 3335U at Ontario Tech University in the fall 2021 semester, and it's week 4, part 2 of our broadcast. We just finished hearing from our guest speaker, Daryl Olson, about world building, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to go back to the schedule a little bit and talk about the stuff that's due a little bit. One thing that comes out of the talk that we just talked about with world building is in-class exercise 2. Again, that's due this Friday at midnight. And really what I talked about was kind of doing a reflection on Suncrest. And I think there's a great opportunity there. If you take a look at the materials that I've put up for those people who haven't seen what Suncrest, the materials here, they're just here inside of the module. So it has the Suncrest campaign world in PDF format, as well as some visual aids. So the image of Suncrest that he didn't like so much, he says, I'm terrible at doing this. But what he's done is he's given himself an aid in terms of these little quadrants, if you will, in the city. He used kind of a hex grid, to create that. And the other thing that he's done, let's go back to modules. The other thing that he's done for you is he's also created a visual aid for the Great Blue Mantle, which it's what he calls his world, right? So he's kind of placed Suncrest here, right? So you can see that this is where Suncrest is. It's a representation of the city. And then there's other settlements that he's kind of penciled in and that he will continue to iterate on. So again, he's going to talk about, a little bit of, it's going to talk about Cornerstone and Eondale and a bunch of other places as the world goes. As players, we'll be asked to traverse the world, and whether it's by ship or over land, you can see that this is a mountainous region and this is a forested region. So lots of opportunities for stuff that we're going to be doing there. But what I want you guys to focus on in the stuff that we're doing with this course is I want you to, these are just examples and to assist you with visualizing the campaign world of Suncrest. So when you do your in-class exercise, take a look at the stuff that he's written. Again, it's about 11 pages of writing, and that he's put together some thoughts in terms of things that you're going to see. He's also mentioned, key non-player characters that you might see in different locations, and a little bit about what they're like, and he goes into it quite a bit. So take a look at that. It's not a long read, and I think you'll get a sense of kind of the world and how it works. And what I want you guys to do is give an honest view. If you're going to take this information, is it enough? Would you need more? Would you add more? Would you take a different direction? Would you use different formats? What would you do differently if it was you? And that's what in-class exercise 2 is all about. I also just want to briefly talk about assignments. I've kind of penciled in the assignments for assignment 3. You can see that that's due November 10th. So it's November 7th. And then there's another assignment. This should actually say assignment 4. Just a second. See what happens when I look at that. I'm like assignment 3 twice. This should actually say assignment 4. And assignment 4 is the second part of your create your own game system assignment. And that is going to be due a little bit later on. It looks like week 11. And again, that sounds like it's really far away. We're talking about December 1st, but that's going to roll up on you fairly quickly, as well as all the other stuff that you have for this course, other courses, and stuff like that. So, again, what I want you to do now is start working on your assignment 2. It's a group assignment, if you look at it, and I've kind of put some details in here, which I will go through with you right now and get some questions for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm looking at, okay? So there's a couple sections that I want. Section 1 is the game. So now that you've finished off your encounter, the next piece is, as a group, choose the best encounter for assignment 1. And I kind of talked about this a couple of times in different presentations. And then I want you guys to elect a DM. Again, they can be called the Dungeon Master, the Keeper, the Narrator. If you don't like the term Master, it doesn't really matter. But, this does not have to be the person who created the winning encounter. You can pick whoever. you can elect whoever. If someone likes, let's suppose I really like, I'm just going to pick a random person here. Nicholas's encounter. Let's suppose his writing is awesome and I really liked what he's put together, or I really like Aim's encounter or Samuel's encounter. Then I choose that. Doesn't mean that Samuel or Aim or Nicholas is going to be the DM unless we decide as a group that that's the case. And if it is, that's great. That person is going to be DM. And that means that they're going to be responsible for different types of prep than the players. So, I mean, if they've spent time already creating a character, it's okay. It's good practice anyway. But that character probably won't be used in this gameplay session, okay? So set aside a good amount of time. That's the next piece. Number 3, to create your D&D characters and play, okay? So what that means is you need about 4 to 6 hours, like I talked about before. We've talked about this with Daryl as well. And this may include 1 to 2 hours of character creation. And I mentioned a couple tools that can help you. Roll20 has a built-in character sheet that allows you to do a lot with, kind of plotting your character, but it doesn't help you generate a character. Not really, right? It uses the D&D, some D&D information that comes from Wizards of the Coast, but it's limited in terms of what it gives you, right? It doesn't generate the character. From a character generation perspective, it's better to use something, if you can afford it, like Hero Lab. If you're planning to play D&D more than once, that's good. Some people also don't like to use digital tools at all, and they want to do things manually. Some people make their own character sheets. They use Excel. There's a lot of ways to do things where you plot things out. You just follow the basic rules and create your characters. Some people also like to play the stock characters that they get from the basic rules. There's a dwarf, an elf, and so on, different kinds of races and classes that they allow you to do to play out your character. And they start with that as a basis because they've never played Dungeons & Dragons before. It doesn't matter how you generate your characters to me, but they should be first level when you start off. Ethan says, good old pen and paper has a charm to it. I agree. And if we were playing in person, that's the mode that is preferable in many ways. But I'll tell you, over the years, especially over the last few years, I've shifted to using Hero Lab on my iPad because it's quick, it's easy, it keeps track of everything. I don't lose my character sheet, and it's online on the cloud. So especially if you're traveling to a friend's house and you're in person, forgetting your character sheet can be pretty catastrophic, right? So waste your time. So having everything in one place is really nice. Also, one thing that we're doing when it comes to rolling online or using Roll20 is you don't need dice. Remember that when you play Dungeons & Dragons, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but if you look at D&D dice, right? If you look at D&D dice, what they look like is different kinds of dice. There's different kinds of dice that you're going to use for Dungeons & Dragons, not this type. But it usually is, the standard is a D20, right? So a 20-sided die, a D12, which is a dodecahedron, right? Some kind of regular die, so 6-sided die, 10-sided die, an 8-sided die, a 4-sided die, and you could have 2 10-sided dies to create something called percentile dice. So lots of dice. And you don't need any of this stuff if you're playing Roll20, because if you play Roll20, so just pull Roll20 over, like I mentioned before, and I recommend it as something to start with. It gives you pretty much everything you need. It also gives you tokens to represent your character on the world map, all right, which I think is really good. You need some way to keep track of the character's location in the game, and it gives you dice that are virtual dice to roll. So I think this is really, really good. Again, what I don't recommend is using Roll20's communication system where you can see everyone's faces and hear everybody here. I would turn that off, and you can do that in settings. There's a settings option on the right, and when you turn it off, you can turn on something like Discord or, something like even Zoom or whatever. Any kind of conferencing software is good, and it's better than having it work with Roll20. Great thing about Roll20 is you can have music going in the background to set the theme. So the DM controls everything, and there's the DM view, and then there's the player view. So again, what I'm asking you to do here is important. Take a look at the requirements. So choose a tabletop tool, right? After you put aside some time, 4 to 6 hours, plan a session. And I recommend it because remember, this thing is due on Monday. It's got to be this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Plan a session, 4 to 6 hours with your group. Okay, that's what I'm recommending. And if you think it's going to be less time than that, or if you try and knock it off in an hour, that's not a role-playing session. You won't get the effect of it, and your writing will show. You'll see that it doesn't make sense what you write. Okay, so check this out. I recommend Roll20 because there's a lot that you can do with it, and it's free. Okay, but there's other tools. If you want to use other tools, it doesn't matter to me how you're going to do it. DMs and players should explore this tool ahead of time and before the scheduled role-playing session because you need to know how it works. Okay, and choose a communication tool that's different, like I recommend. Something like Discord is fine. There are also some other recommendations, things that you may not be comfortable with. For example, you should show your faces when you're playing as much as possible. Not a character, not some kind of anime. If you don't have a camera, you can use your cell phone to do it. It doesn't matter. You should show your face when you're playing live. Why? Because that will capture the same feeling that we would have if we were live and in person, where everyone is kind of concentrating on the same thing at the same time. The other thing I would ask you to do, and this is something that I didn't write here, is because you're remote, try not to do something else at the same time. And this is kind of a real challenge. Some people will play other games, handheld stuff, text each other, and all that kind of stuff when they're playing Dungeons & Dragons. That's terrible. That's bad form and bad protocol. Focus yourself on the game. Focus yourself on being social with the people you've chosen to be with. Okay, your friends, the people that are in your group. So again, the recommendation is face-to-face, communication as much as possible. DMs should prepare the encounter. So whatever you encounter is the winning encounter. On the remote tool, you may have to add things like maps. Take the idea that the encounter has and add, visual aids and those kind of things. Or what else? The other thing you can do with Roll20 is it allows you to freehand draw on kind of a stage area where you can draw, kind of the scene. If you're someone who's, artistically inclined, or even if you're just able to draw basic shapes and allow your players to use tokens in the game world, that's enough. You don't have to go too crazy. So that's something. Prepare the encounter beforehand. It's gonna take some time. So don't just show up raw and say, okay, let's try and figure this Roll20 stuff out now in the 4 to 6 hours we have. No. DMs, if you get elected as a DM, and you guys should get together and do that as soon as possible. There needs prep time. You're gonna get, there's more prep time for you than in many ways than there is for the players, because you got to set up the encounter, try it out, try the tool, make sure it works, get people together, and all that kind of stuff. It's more work for you, whoever you are, than everyone else, at least at the beginning. And again, like I say here, you need to work out the kinks beforehand, so don't wait till the last minute. Then play the encounter. Finally, you get together on the day of, you play the encounter. Try to keep as close as possible to one of the encounter hooks to draw players in. So don't just try and procedurally talk about your world. Remember, you're trying to keep the encounter as much as possible. This is the test. And again, if you use Roll20, it includes virtual dice and other kind of tools to help you. Other recommendations is try to avoid being a rules lawyer. Okay, so if you have a rule dispute, that, for example, if you think the player doesn't have line of sight and the player says he's got line of sight, if you can draw a line between the enemy and the player, then there's line of sight. That's the way you do it. But if it's something else, like, for example, you're looking at an obscure rule in the books, like, let's say for something like, casting in combat, how do I do that? And you can't remember, and it's taking too long to figure out what the effects are going to be when somebody's casting in combat. Do they get disadvantaged? Do they get a minus? Do they have to make concentration rolls? What is it that you have to go through? I'm going to leave that to you to figure out, right? Just as an example, if it takes too long, I recommend siding with the player, right? Worst case. So that way you can move the game forward. You want to move the game forward. You don't want to be a stickler. If you make mistakes and if you miss something, don't beat yourself up over it, because it's one of the first times you're doing this, potentially. And also you're doing it live and online for the first time, which is even more difficult. So that's the first part. So the first part is playing the game. The second part, and I think I missed something here, I did, is the report. All right, so the report is something that I want you guys to kind of put together as a group. So the first part is after your game, you put together a small report. You can use any format you want. If you want to use PowerPoint and make bullet form, you can do that. All team members should have their own feedback and reflection. Think about this as all team members should have one page on a PowerPoint document if you want to use PowerPoint, or if you want to use Word or Google Docs or whatever, you can have a small section about their reflections. So each player should do that. I also need some information about who played. So just basic information, your group members' names, student IDs, encounters, the encounter that was chosen, the date of the role-playing session, who ran the game, who's the DM, and the length of play in hours. And one thing that I'm missing here when you do your submission is I also want a PDF copy of all of your character sheets. So that's another thing, a PDF copy of each team member's character sheet. Okay, so I want to see what that looks like. So take a PDF copy. There's every tool that you can use. You can generate a PDF copy. Worst case scenario, if you're using some other tool, you can always get a snapshot and convert it to PDF. So that's something that I'm wanting to look at. Okay, so that's what's happening. Please answer these questions. Fardeen, give me 1 second. I'll answer your question. What went well? What didn't go so well? Very simple reflection, right? Almost like a retrospective more than anything else. If you were to do this again, what would you change? Would you change your character? Would you change the DM? Would you pick another encounter? As an example, would you pick another tool? Like lots and stuff like that you can think of. And do you like it? Do you like D&D? And if you like it, what did you like? What didn't you like? What works? And what do you think is broken about the game system, if anything? So talk about, your experience. Talk about the game. Talk about is it social? Do you agree, that this was done well, and so on? Because the idea here is that if you don't like it, and it's totally cool not to like Dungeons and Dragons, even if you're someone that says, "Oh, Tom, I'm not interested in tabletop role playing games at all." Good. That means that you can reflect, and you can discuss why you didn't like the experience and why maybe you like video games more, or why you really loved it and you thought that it was fantastic, and what elements are you going to bring into your own games. So Fardeen says, so one introduction page slides done with everyone, and then everyone has their individual page slides. Yeah, I think it's the idea is, put together kind of an overview, I think, is part one, like what happened. You could additionally add other information here. This is kind of the bare minimum that I'm looking for. But if, for example, if you want to kind of give me a brief overview of how everything went, you could add that in here in part two. Oh yeah, I made two twice. Let me just adjust that too, since we're at it. Aha. Three. Okay. So yeah, so you could do a brief overview here, right? So when you start thinking about the encounter chosen, you can discuss how things went. So talk about it here as a group, but each member should also have their own little section, right? Like basically says, this is what I did, here's how I felt, this is what happened, and put it together as a team. I don't want individual submissions here. It's one document that's for everybody, okay? Okay, any other questions around assignment 2? And assignment 2 is due again on Monday. So this Monday coming up, so after the weekend. And I'm hoping that you guys are going to be able to do it and the reason why I'm making it so tight in terms of time frame, not that I want to kill you guys, but we have quite an agenda. And I mean that in terms of what's happening. So finishing off assignment 2 and then getting into your midterm exam is important. And that's why I want you to do that way before Thanksgiving. The reason why I made the exam due on Saturday and not on Sunday, some people have asked me that question, is because Sunday, a lot of people celebrate Thanksgiving in addition to Monday, even though officially it's Monday. And I don't want, I don't want you guys to feel like you're limited. Some people are also not celebrating Thanksgiving this year for different reasons. So, whatever the situation is, maybe you just want to take a break or, a day off. Typically Sunday and Monday I don't try and schedule things on the Thanksgiving weekend, right? But Saturday, I think that's when it's going to be due. Okay. Is it a jam? A game jam on Saturday? Yeah. So try and get it done beforehand, Jonathan. Like try and schedule it for Friday, this Friday if you can. That'd be awesome. All right. So that is what's due. Let's get into the next piece, October 8th to 10th. Okay, so good. Thanks, Robson. I'm glad that that's not happening during my time. I think that 8th to 10th is, so you're gonna let's suppose you do your game session Friday, Saturday, whatever. But the midterm is from Monday to the Saturday. You can do that any one of those days coming up. And again, that's why I'm releasing it early on Monday, so you have a chance to get it done. The whole thing for your midterm, again, should take no more than 3 or 4 hours, just like it would normally take, if you were in person. So I'm not trying to kill you again. It's not made for that. And if I see that there's a lot of scope, when I talk to Stephen on Sunday, we'll cut it back. Okay, because I want to make it so that it's worthy, it's challenging, but it's not going to take a whole pile of time. And that goes for both sides, whether it's theoretical or practical. I'm going to reduce it, so that it's doable. Any other questions for what's due, the time frames, and all that kind of stuff before the mid-semester break? Oh, one thing to note next week. So next week on Wednesday, because you're going to have your midterm exam, there will be no lecture scheduled. However, I will be available during this time frame to answer questions and all that kind of stuff, to give you guys any kind of help I can throughout that time. So you'll have 2 helpers, one on Monday during the regular scheduled tutorial or lab, and then me on the Wednesday night from 6:30 to 9:30 for any other kind of technical or other kind of questions you may have related to the midterm exam. Okay, so no class next week, no lecture, not scheduled. If you want to come, I'm going to be here. I'll be in the same time frame, just to let you guys know. Exactly. Question time. All right. So let's move on to the next part, because I want to get through this part for the last hour of our time together. Social networks. So let's think about, we've talked about, mobile games or mobile game social, but what about social networks? What is a social network? And the definition that you can find easily online is a network of social interactions and personal relationships. I think those are key. And also it could be a website, an application, or some other medium that allows users to communicate with one another through posting messages or comments or images or what have you, videos, that kind of stuff. So that's really what a social network is. So what about a social game? So really, it comes back to that interaction again. It's one where players' interactions with other players help drive adoption of the game. That's really what it's about, right? And the idea with interactions help to retain and attract players. And social games use some kind of external social network of some type. Could be Facebook, YouTube, Discord, Twitch, Twitter, or something else that we're going to mention, in the following slides, to facilitate these kinds of goals, which is retain and attract players. Really, that's what it's about. Okay. Let's go back to this one. So again, we saw this image before in a previous lecture, one of the first lectures I did with you guys, which is it's a smartphone or a tablet or other handheld device allows users to engage in some kind of social activity. Then the definition for what we just talked about applies to mobile games as well. And you can see that there's a ton of mobile games that are social. So what social networks are popular today? Again, this is an interesting image. Lots of social networks out there. Let's talk about, the types, the number one or the top 15 or 20 of these social networks. So again, surprisingly, Facebook, although people keep saying, I'm going to quit Facebook, I'm done with Facebook. I look at Facebook and it's like 2.74 billion active users. And they still are number one from a social networking perspective, even though people say, I'm not going to use Facebook anymore, I'm done. It breaches my privacy. They sell my information, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't matter. People still use Facebook. YouTube is number 2 with 2.29. This is just active users, by active users, right? And then it's WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, and I've highlighted Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram because sometimes people use those for social networks for games as well. TikTok's on there, number 7. And there's also a lot of Asian social networks out there as well. WeChat, as an example, it's really an Asian social network, QQ, and so on, and a bunch of other ones. But you notice that there's one thing that's missing here from a social network perspective is Twitter. Twitter's actually reduced. It's gone down quite a bit compared to other ones. I mean, it might be number 16 or something like that, or tied with one of the other ones. But it's not really up here for like the top 15. And when we compare the top 15 social media networks, which is an important look at, let's take it also look at where are gamers nowadays. If I was going to search out the number of video game players worldwide in 2021 by region, you can see that the total number of gamers right now is at around 3.2 billion. 3.2 billion gamers. That's like, if you think about our world being around 7 billion, 7.5, and for the people who are playing, that's almost half of us in the entire world play games. And this is mostly in the developed world. Asia is the biggest center of gaming right now with 1.4 billion players. Right? Europe is number 2 with 715 million, followed by Latin America at 419 million, and then North America at 284 million. So for us, we're sitting here, we always think that North America is like the center of the universe when it comes to gaming, but actually, if you add up all the gamers that exist outside of North America, we are really dwarfed by the amount of people that are out there, right? So huge, huge networks, huge opportunities for marketing in Asia and in Europe and in Latin America. And I think a lot of times we don't think about these markets. And that's why it's important for us to do things like, localization for our games. So making our game only functioning in English is terrible. It's a bad idea. You should at least hit the big ones, hit Spanish. So convert your game, make sure you translate, hire somebody to have your game available in different languages so that it's available on Steam or another platform, and it's available for other people to pick up and play in different places, especially in Asia and in European markets, right? So think about the languages, the main languages in Europe, Latin America, and in Asia. And if you can hit those languages, then you can appeal to a much larger audience of players than you would if it was just English in North America. Okay, so huge amount of players. By the way, Europe also includes the UK. But take a look at the top social networks for gamers, so that although we talked about top social networks for everybody, Facebook's still up there. Facebook, YouTube, Discord comes up now as number 3. And this is in order of kind of popularity. Steam is number 4. Twitch is huge. And then it's Twitter. Twitter comes back into the scene as another tool that we use for social networks for gamers. All right, so that's something that we have to connect with. And let's take a look at Facebook for a second. When I think about Facebook, and again, it's like the oldest one, maybe the first one that we started to use that's here on this list. And when I first, thought about social and multiplayer, kind of some of the old material that I was looking at was all around Facebook and Farmville and a bunch of all those games that first started off back in the day. We're talking about in, between 2010 and 2013. And nowadays, again, Facebook gaming isn't as popular, but Facebook has some great opportunities from an engagement perspective. There's a lot of fan pages or brand pages or game pages, gaming communities that you can connect with different groups, a lot of ads that can also support games, as well as videos, images, content, all that kind of stuff being shared on Facebook still. It's huge. And remember, it's not just North America, it's everywhere in the world, right? So And yeah, one kind of comment is that hate that I need to make a Facebook account to use Oculus. Me too. I wish it wasn't required. And the first chance I get, guys, when I have a chance to move off of Oculus to some other kind of platform where I don't have to worry about a big corporation like Facebook, it'd be happy things. But it would be nice if we didn't need to, but we do need it, and I understand why. But my fear always when it comes to Facebook is that they're going to be more and more intrusive into kind of our privacy and the stuff that we're doing. Let's go back to YouTube. YouTube, again, we're on YouTube right now, broadcasting live, right? It's, again, one of the most influential channels for game marketing, for sure. Millions of users, again, use YouTube. Lots of product and tutorials that are out there for anything you want to learn. Everything from learning how to do Unity to Unreal, to again, playing release trailers for your game. Lots of stuff that's out there. YouTube is definitely a social network that you don't want to ignore when it comes to marketing for your game. YouTube Premium. Yeah, I'm not sure that I would say YouTube Premium is the way to go either. I think it's a good kind of marketing scheme, but I think for the most part we can use YouTube the way it is, and I think the best way to use YouTube for us, for game developers, is trailers. If you can work with influencers, that's awesome. Good luck. It's tough to get in with some of these guys, especially in girls. Especially when there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of call for working with influencers, especially if you don't have a lot of money, unless you know them personally, or if you meet them somewhere, as an example, in some kind of conference or show. It's really hard to connect with these people. Making behind the scenes videos about your game, bloopers, those kind of things, and how you work is also really key. Again, it connects you with the audience, with your players. Sharing tutorials and walkthroughs, again, about how to play your game, especially if it's a very complex game. There's lots of that out there. So all these things are different engagement strategies, so that way you can use YouTube for marketing and, as a social network. Okay, so what else? What about Discord? I know we use Discord for school. We use Discord for personal, for gaming, for all kinds of stuff. But the main thing about it is the reason why Discord is huge when it comes to businesses and gaming companies connecting with their gamers is because they can connect directly. That's the main thing. I can connect with a player directly anywhere in the world that's playing my game, and then get them to talk, get them to give me feedback, get them to tell me what's broken, trying to, kind of interact with them. And a good example of this is, I joined the Discord for Valheim. I was kind of into Valheim, last year and into this year. And, when it first got introduced, and when I was into it, as an example, I joined the Discord, community for Valheim. Now I saw a lot of, kind of recommendation. It was a noisy server. That's for sure. And I ended up leaving it. But the thing is about it is that there was so much interest and the community grew so large so quickly. I think that's been one of the great success stories from a small company that's used Unity with a group of 5 developers to make a game that's made them, a lot of money over the short term. So really great way of doing it. And they use Discord, they use Unity, and they did early access as a strategy in order for them to get their game out there on Steam. So really awesome. And only one platform. They didn't target multiple platforms like console and mobile, only on PC right now. But I think that game, you're going to see that game everywhere eventually. I'm just looking at some of the comments here as we can continue to go. So really cool stuff. Discord does take a share when it comes to companies using it for professional reasons. They do take a share, but it's not bad. You can always test alphas and betas on Discord if you want to try early releases. Things can go crazy. They can go viral. You can also use Discord's analytics with bots, right? When people come on and ask questions and so on, to see how many people are interested and engaged. And of course, you can create communities with Discord as well. So that's the next one. Steam. We can't forget Steam. Steam is, although it's not really a social media platform, what it says here, it's the mecca for PC gamers, and I agree with that. If you're a PC gamer and if you don't have Steam, I would be very surprised. One thing that you can do is you can make your own Steam page when you have a game, or as a developer. You should use at least 15 tags, it says, for your game to increase places you get featured, which is interesting. So there's some kind of a formula for how to be successful, and experiment with your little capsule image to make it so it's more interesting. You can track how the click-through rates. So Steam is really awesome when it comes to stats and measurements, which is awesome. And again, think about this, an appealing trailer. The same trailer you made on YouTube, you can actually make it on YouTube and feature it on Steam. And the most important part is that first 10 seconds, because most people won't watch a trailer beyond the first 10 seconds. If the first 10 seconds is terrible, or it takes too long for things to come in, your conflict and whatever, I like to think about it as like a little mini movie, where in a real movie, if it's 120 minutes, right, where a trailer might be something like 1 minute and 20 seconds, so let's say a really microcosm, a small mini movie, then for a movie, the first 10 minutes, if you don't see the conflict within the first 10 minutes, something's wrong with that movie, typically from a Hollywood perspective. Same too for a trailer. 10 seconds. You have 10 seconds to show me what the thing's about. Otherwise, I'm going to walk away and look at something else, most likely. That's how much of attention span we give trailers nowadays. And then, again, the other thing is consider your game description. When you put your game description, you put it up on Steam or somewhere else as an elevator pitch, because that's important for your game to be understood. What is your game, the kind of game that you're making? All right, Twitch. We can't not talk about Twitch. Twitch, I mean, I'm not sure why it's number 5. To me, I think it should be like number 1 in terms of how much interest there is with Twitch, and especially with esports and everything else that's going on there. There's always something going on Twitch. Every time I turn that on, it's like I'm fascinated by the conversations that are happening, and it says Twitch should not be number 1. I know you might disagree, but I'm telling you that there's so much going on Twitch right now, and especially with esports, I'm surprised that it's not ranked higher than number 5. Again, 72% of all hours users spend watching live streams on the internet, Twitch, right? More than YouTube. 2.2 to 3.2 monthly broadcasters, people who broadcast live, with 15 million daily active users. It's huge, the platform. So if you haven't gone on Twitch, it's huge. Engagement strategies is obviously working with influencers. That's where Twitch has a lot of celebrities, people that have been on, that are viral, that people watch all the time. That's the place to connect. And if you can stream your game, and even if you do it in 2 places, if you can do that with OBS, Twitch, stream your game on Twitch, stream your game on YouTube all at the same time. It's awesome. Your penetration in terms of audience and reach is huge, right? So take a look at that when you have a chance, if you haven't had a chance to do that already. Twitch. All right, number 6 is Twitter. You know what? I wouldn't have thought this would have been number 6 either. I thought, that would have been lower. Twitter's got a bad rap over the last little while, especially with what's happened in the States over the last few years, again, with President Trump and all that stuff when he was president. But it has a lot of power. There's a lot of users, a lot of people who use Twitter. I'll tell you that I use Twitter on a daily basis myself for things like news and events. A lot of stuff that I see coming up, especially things about game news, and everything from Dungeons and Dragons to my favorite authors that I want to read. Again, example, one of my favorite authors that I like to read is Joe Abercrombie. He's got his own Twitter following and everything else, and you read these kind of things, and the authors themselves, and something that we never had when I was coming up, right? Was we never had access to talk to authors and creators, if you will, creatives, live on a regular basis and see what they were thinking, their thought process, and not just that, but also their connections, the things that they like, things that they don't like, that kind of stuff. So it's very, very interesting. So, yeah, I agree with you. I would say that, um, I was never into Twitter. And over the last, I would say, few years, especially now over COVID and stuff, I think it's really increased for me. And I've got a lot of, honestly, I get a lot more live news through Twitter than I do through regular channels. It's amazing what you get from that. So I understand number 6 for sure. So again, questions around social networks. Do you guys think it's a thing? Would you think that it's important? What are your thoughts? Is there a social network I didn't talk about that you think is more important than one of these things, or just as important? I know I didn't really talk about Instagram as a thing, or TikTok, for gamers. But what about for gamers, gaming specific? So Jonathan says built-in text channels and MMOs. Yeah, that's part of the internal network community. That's part of it. So if you're playing, for example, something like Destiny, Daryl mentioned Destiny is one of his favorite games, first-person shooter. It's very popular to play, and to become part of a clan and that kind of stuff, so you can get more rewards. Reddit, yes, I can see some of that. Some wikis, example for walkthroughs. I know that people use those for walkthroughs and other things. It's pretty popular out there. Jonathan says that social media presence can make and break game development. People who have never made games, if popular enough, can have massive successes. And I agree with that for sure, because I think, it comes down to marketing. And if you think about the marketing philosophy, and again, I'm not a marketing major, but one of the psychologies of marketing is this: if 100% of the world knows about your product, then you're going to sell that product. It's just going to happen, because even if there's a small percentage of people who like what you've created, right, in the world, and everybody in the world knows about it, it's viral, right? Then there's going to be potentially millions of people who are going to buy your product, which means your product is going to be successful. So marketing is huge. If you can get your product, your game, known, even if it's to a small group, let's say, for example, not a billion, but let's say 1 million people, right? Sounds like a small group, but that's crazy. It builds. It starts off with thousands, and then it goes into tens of thousands and whatever. And this is what happened with Valheim. And then they had 6 million players, in a very short time, from February till today. I think they're at 7 or 8 million players. So huge. And we're talking about a small group of 5 people. And if the game costs $20 on Steam, approximately, do the calculation. 7 million players, $20 each. That's a lot of money for the developers in a very short time frame. So, and it's all through one of the bigger networks. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about why they're so popular. Games in general, especially social games, like we talked about today with world building and D&D and everything else, facilitate human contact. This is the main thing here. And we use rules to recruit the learning machinery of the brain. And I really love that line. And what they do is they engage creativity, right? And this is the new entertainment, the new media, right? It's not movies anymore. It's games and interactive media, right? And the other thing is that games can be consumed anywhere now, not like before. And they're uniquely suited to asynchronous consumption, where you don't have to kind of, play it all at once or whatever. And now, too, of course, movies and especially with streaming services like Netflix and Prime Video, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, and so on, all these subscription services that are out there, they're also jumping on that model, which allows you to play them asynchronously. You don't have to play them in sequence. You can start watching a show, and then you have to go somewhere and you stop watching and you pick up where you were before when you left off. That's huge. And there's no ads. And that is a lot different than how we were, back in the day. Let's talk about some different types of social games and social network games specifically. We talked about the RPG to death. We've been talking about it from day one. And as we move into your midterm exam, at this point, you should know the concepts of what a tabletop RPG is. But what about RPGs when it comes to games? Again, I know this is a definition that you've already heard. This is nothing new. But I'm going to mention it again for you because it's involved some kind of character development, right? And we have some kind of stats. So when you make your own game system, you need to have your own stats. Many role-playing game video, they derive from tabletop games such as Dungeons and Dragons, which we've done before. And players gain experience, loot, and information through a series of quests. And often there may be a main quest. And here's some examples of some fairly popular, I would say, handheld or mobile role-playing games. Final Fantasy, as well as Cat Quest 2, which I found was pretty interesting. All right, let's go into strategy games. That's another type of social network game that works nicely with mobile. Games that focus on skillful thinking and planning to achieve a victory. It could be turn-based or real-time. They may include one or more opponent. You could also include team strategies as well. And a lot of times they involved economic challenges like construction, population maintenance, resource management of some kind. And there's a couple of examples here, Escapist 2 and Fallout Shelter, that came up when I was doing my searches. So again, it was a bit of a grind, but again, very, strategic in the way you would accept or gain resources. And it was interesting, Fallout Shelter was a bit of an experiment for Bethesda. They really came up with it as a precursor to Fallout 76. And because Fallout 76 was a lot of hype around it before it came out. And then, of course, Fallout 76 came out and fell flat. And Fallout Shelter kept going, right? And it was cheap. It was you could play it. And there was some, in-app purchases eventually as well. But for the most part, Fallout Shelter was a success, where the bigger game, the AAA game that they came out with later on, which is Fallout 76, wasn't so much of a success when it first came out because of all the glitches, bugs, and all that stuff, because Bethesda was trying something new to make a social game out of their Fallout series, which is traditionally single player. Then there's simulation games. Let's talk about this. Simulation games are huge. And the reason why they're huge is a lot of times they're single player, but sometimes they can include multiple players as well. A lot of times they focus on the management of some kind of environment. It could be a farm, a restaurant, a zoo, a job. I'm thinking Job Simulator in VR, or even Vacation Simulator in VR. Very funny games. And one of the first games that I saw in VR that were very interesting and very, very playable. Very, very neat. So check out Job Simulator if you haven't had a chance to in VR. A couple of games that come to mind are Game Dev Tycoon and Pocket City. Again, a couple of simulation games that work well on mobile. And then there's casual games. Of course, the biggest one that I can remember is Candy Crush Saga. And then the other one, when we say casual, it's like simple gameplay, easy to understand. Puzzle games a lot of times fit into this model with a simple user interface and short sessions so that, we can play them during breaks. Remember we talked about last day, which was make it easy for the player to start playing. Make it easy for the player to stop playing. We talked about those things last day in our lecture. So Candy Crush Saga falls right into that. Stardew Valley, not so much, but it's a very casual game, and it allows us to connect and play with other players as well. Again, it reminds me of other games that are out there, and this is kind of a love story, to making a game just like this. And there was other games that were made previous to this one. Right, so and Stardew Valley was made by one guy, all right, and he was working on it for just years and years on his own. So if you want to listen to the story behind Stardew Valley, it's actually really cool, and the fact that it came out on mobile and was also very, very popular is awesome, and it speaks volumes to the simplicity that it can work on a mobile or handheld device. So that's some examples, not all of them, but some examples of different types of social network games. And again, if I was going to say to you, classify the type of game that you're making for a mobile game, what is it? It might fall into one of these categories, and there might be others. Okay, these aren't the only ones. Let's talk about some top social features. We talked about them before in a very high level, and I want to bring it back to you again as maybe the top 13 social features that make social games, and especially social mobile games, super successful, right? So in-game chat, social media connection. We just talked about social media to death. Sand asks for help, leaderboards, guilds or clans, co-op modes, PvP modes, as an example. Social currency, when you do something to get, it's not like in-game currency, but you need to do something in the game, that creates opportunities or unlocks certain things in the game. So social currency, spectator mode, push notifications, the ability for you to see other players' progression and activity, hangout rooms, and shareable achievements and replays. So I think these are really great, kind of a top 13 of things that you might want to include in your game to make it more social. A lot of this, when it comes down to it, when we start thinking about social games, and last week we're talking about narrative design, this week we're talking about world building, it all comes down to the idea of user-centered design. And I know that in other courses, for example, Alvaro has a great hardware course that he pulls off. And he talks about user-centered design and interaction design, design thinking. They're kind of all related in some ways. So user-centered design is kind of the first part of it. I always like to think about it as if I was going to make an app or if I was going to make something professional for a company, user-centered design is where I would start thinking about it, right? And you can think about things like understand the context, make sure that you meet the user requirements, talk to the user, get out there, think about design solutions that are, that the user wants, and then evaluate against requirements, and then iterate and iterate and iterate. And keep going back out there and talking with the user. That's user-centered design. But then when it comes to another type of design, which is what we've been talking about really abstractly over the last few weeks, it's player-centered design. Make the player at the center of the story is what Daryl said today. And I agree with that 100%. Player-centered design, it kind of extends user-centered design to another level. And we use user-centered design to develop applications, but player-centered design really helps us make a game. And one of the things that we want to always think about is these 6 steps on the left, which is first, understand the player. Who are you making this game for? What's the audience? Next is understand the mission. What is the game, right? Understand motivation. What motivates a player to keep playing? And then think about game mechanics. Measure, monitor, and manage the game mechanics as much as possible. And at all times, the idea with all this is keep it fun. Great little design diagram here that looks like a target. The other one I like to look at is it's all around, player-centered design is all around iteration. All right, so we iterate the code, as an example. First, we start out as envisioning what the game is about or concepting. It goes into thinking about what the players are. We develop personas for what kind of players are typically going to play our game. We move into identifying the fun by creating prototypes and creating stories. Narrative design goes right in here. World building. Start thinking about goal structures that comes out of the stories and world building, and crafting experiences, encounters, and quests. Then continue to build, and while you're building, start doing your coding process and measure how things are going. Maybe you do a first release or an early release, start refining and measuring, and then again through that loop over and over again as you continue to work to improve your game. So really interesting. Player-centered design is something we're going to be talking about in future lectures. One thing we can't get away from when we talk about social games and social networks is Bartle. Richard Bartle, the inventor of the MUD, the multi-user dungeon that we talked about earlier. He was the first person to really observe this wide variety of gaming styles. At least he remarked on it. He observed it and created this, kind of information on it, or a white paper. And you may have already done some reading about Bartle. Maybe James in some of his design courses has talked about Bartle. And so now let's refresh and review about kind of Bartle's 4 types of fun with again this little graph. Different kinds of people. Either you're a type of person that likes doing things to someone or something, while others were interested in doing things with someone or something. That's something kind of like Daryl was talking about when he says, when we first started playing Dungeons & Dragons, it was the first type. we were more in line with doing things to someone or something. It was all about us. It was we were all very kind of self-centered players in many ways. Daryl's basically saying that I'm still that way. It's not true, I swear. But then as we evolved, we became more working with someone or something. And you can plot this idea on this 2D graph. And again, the things that I want to review, this is just a review for you guys, that really works well with what we're talking about here in social games and social networks. Is there's different types of players: achievers, explorers, socializers, killers, and the other type that really Bartle doesn't talk about, which is griefers. And so again, who is your audience, right? What kind of game are you making? Are you going to make a game that really attracts achievers? Is it a competitive type game? Are you going to make a game that targets explorers, a creative type game? Maybe a more casual game. Is it going to be socializers, people who want to be social, maybe a simulation type game or another kind of casual game? Or is it going to go with the killers, another competitive type game? Sometimes achievers and killers, those two types, play the same types of games, as well as briefers, where we still see a lot of that in some older games. I can't tell you how many times, I've had to shut someone down when I'm playing a game because he or she doesn't like, that I'm a new person at the game, and they're pretty rough, right? Especially some of those games, competitive games like Call of Duty, and even other games like Fortnite. You might see a lot of griefing happening there. And it's unfortunate that they ruin the game for other people, but they exist out there, and sometimes they just love doing it, right? So those are the kind of games, the kind of people that are out there. And you got to think about when you make your game. We're talking about design again. These are just the same design ideas that you've been presented to, again in first year, or maybe even in second year. And it's just a reminder. The last thing I want to leave you with is this little chart that you may have seen also before, which is think about motivations, right? And a lot of times we talked about being in the zone, being in a state of flow a little bit. But the idea is that the more players that exist, when we go from a player of one to an infinite amount of players, we start changing the motivation, right? It goes from achievement-based play to more of competitive type play, especially if there's more quantitative, the game is more quantitative. You've got more loot drops and that kind of stuff. It becomes more competitive, right? So as the number of players increases. If you're more qualitative, it's all about the experience, it becomes more a game of cooperation. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. And if you move this down, the bar, the slider to the left, right, so there's only one of you, a lot of times, especially if it's more qualitative, it becomes more about immersion. So VR is kind of an example of that, where a lot of times right now in VR, we're playing on our own, right? And there's a lot of, it's about the experience. It's not necessarily about the achievement in VR, unless you're playing that kind of game. So a lot of times it's about the stories and individual immersion that we're feeling. So this is what I want to leave you with, because this, when it comes to motivations, is something else that can affect, how we plan, how we create social games, and kind of the power of social networks. The more players, it changes our motivations and it changes our behavior. Okay. So that's it for my talk. Any questions around social networks, comments? Do you think that, is it something that you think about? Is it something that you engage in? Are you someone who's social? Do you kind of engage in Discord communities about the game that you're interested in? Is there anyone out there that does that other than just me? All right. You don't have to answer if you don't want, or if you're not interested. I know it's coming on to the last part of the night, and we're all tired. Jane says definitely engage in Rocket League Discord. Cool. Ryan says more of a Reddit goer myself. Yeah, I tried to get into Reddit for so many times. I just find that the platform is, it's interesting. when you get responses, it's the way it works. When I'm searching for information, there's usually a Reddit post that gives me that information. It's almost like the new Stack Overflow in many ways for different things. So interesting. Yeah, reading through wikis for sure. I do the same thing when it comes to walkthroughs and those kind of things. If I have a new game that I want to learn, and it's funny sometimes when they allow you to walk through and those kind of things, it's actually just more kind of drawing you into the game itself. You know what? I love great single player experiences, and I think that's something that again, less social, but that's where where when you don't have a lot of social, then world building becomes even that much more important, right? So, and Discord took over the original. Wow, awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, you know what? YouTubers are awesome to watch too. Like I said, I think I watch YouTube now more than ever, and for different kinds of topics, not just for games, but for everything from computer building, if you want to build hardware, to modeling, if you want to do Warhammer 40K, to whatever you want, whatever you want to see. It's an amazing amount of information that's out there, and they continue to put up more and more information every single day. It's amazing. So anyways, that's it for me, guys. Any questions around the assignments or anything else we presented today? I just wanted to wrap this up here with going back to our map. So remember, just as a last piece of administration for today, that please plan and play your game for assignment 2. It's super important that you get that planned out as soon as possible. In class exercise 2, which is around Suncrest, is due on Friday. So make sure you have a chance to write your thoughts around that. Take a look at the document is what I want you guys to do, and do a bit of a reflection. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Those kind of things that I've asked you to do. And then for your midterm exam, there's really the stuff that I'm going to ask you is all in the lecture. So if I've talked about something in the lecture notes, then there's a good chance that there might be something about it on the midterm tests. And again, short answers and maybe a small, kind of a longer blog type scenario for the theoretical piece with some kind of Unity project that you're going to build. And most likely, guys, I'm pretty sure that Steven's going to ask you to do a WebGL build that you're going to host online. So if you're still unclear about how to do that, again, make sure you attend Steven's tutorial for Monday, because he's going to be there to help you, with your midterm exam. And same thing with me. If you want help from me, I know Unity pretty good. So if you want help with me on your midterm, the practical piece or the theoretical piece on the Wednesday night next week, I'll be here. We may not be here the entire time if there's not a lot of people attending, but it's an open time for you to be able to do your exam. And so you can use our lecture time to use that slot to actually do your exam and write your theory, or do work on your technical piece. Jonathan says, when is the midterm released again? It's going to be as early on Monday as I can get it. So it really depends on Stephen and I. Worst case, you'll see it at the tutorial when you guys go to Stephen's tutorial, and that's when it'll be released. But it'll be ending on Saturday, right? So you'll have that whole week potentially to get it done. Okay. And again, it won't be timed. There won't be a timed exercise in terms of extra time or whatever. You'll have plenty of time, because again, it'll be geared for 3 to 4 hours, and you'll have the whole week to do it, and it's open book. So there shouldn't be an issue. Any other questions before we stop for the day? All right. Well, if you have other questions, you can always ping me on Discord. No problem. You can always connect with me if you have a question about anything that we've talked about today. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for coming out. And I really appreciated the feedback that Daryl got, the questions, and everything else. And I'm glad you guys had a chance to hear what he had to say with all of his experience. I'm really looking forward to the next one as well. Guest lecture 3 is going to be interesting as we're rolling forward. But looking forward to seeing you guys even for questions next week. Otherwise, if we don't see each other, then we'll see each other after the break, which will be officially week 6. So good luck, take care, and I'm looking forward to seeing how your role-playing sessions went. All right, take care. Thank you. Oh, yes, Jaden. Take care. Thanks so much, guys.